Awesome. Okay, I think we're on. Welcome back, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope everybody had a great 4th of July and they're having a wonderful weekend. We are back today for our live stream topic of the week, which today is how to get more of what you want from your partner. And this is such, this comes up all the time because when we talk to people who are sharing what their complaints are, it's really easy to identify the problem. And it's usually framed in terms of what's wrong, what's missing, and what they're not getting from their spouse. Whatever the particulars of their complaints are, it usually comes down to a few core things. They might not feel seen or heard or understood or appreciated. Cherished is a big one, right? And in fact, they're feeling the complete opposite. So the biggest complaints we get are, I don't really feel appreciated. I don't really feel understood. I don't feel like I know my spouse loves me intellectually, but I don't really feel loved. Right. I don't feel like they even like me, right? Yeah. That's the cherishing thing. And the reason for this most of the time is that people don't know how to give this stuff to their partners or even receive it because there's usually some kind of buildup or harboring of resentments or negative emotions that's creating a wall. And it really can happen in tiny increments over time where you don't notice it necessarily happening. And eventually there's just this block and you realize, gosh, it doesn't feel very good anymore. Like we're not really connecting. I don't really feel the love. And you can't really pinpoint where that happened.
Right.
So we're going to talk about that, how over time, this wall of resentment builds and what you can do about it. We're going to talk specifically about how these unmet needs in a relationship build up over time and how they show up specifically, the biggest complaints that we hear. And then, more importantly, how we're going to break this pattern, how you can break this pattern to get what you truly desire. And it's not most likely what you think. Right. So definitely stay tuned. Ned and Kelly, I know one of the things that you guys see, and we talk about this, is that couples who are not feeling like they're really getting what they want and they're complaining about their spouse or they're identifying what's really missing. And one of the things that comes up around that is that, or the way that shows up is that they're not able to have an honest conversation where they can share their feelings, where they can be heard, where they can actually resolve something or problem solve together because the conversation just gets derailed.
Right. Yeah.
What do you guys do with that?
Yeah, it gets completely derailed because there's so much resentment, and what's happening in these moments is people are just triggered. Mm-hmm. And what happens is when one partner gets triggered, it's going to automatically trigger the inner wounded child in your partner. And so you just go round and round in these very childish, very immature, unproductive, cyclical arguments and fights. And this shows up, pretty early on in relationship. And I wanted to make this point because I've been making it a point to make this point to people, and it's so important because waiting to do something about a problem when it shows up, just thinking that it's going to solve itself, is totally false. That's a total myth. And time really becomes your enemy the longer you wait to get help. Because what I've noticed in doing this work for so long is there are three pretty distinct relationship dynamics that people come seek us out, in these three different dynamics. And the first dynamic is they're still kind of newish. They might be in their second marriage a lot of times. And they're noticing they love each other. Intimacy is still happening, but they're noticing some patterns, some bad patterns and bad behaviors, bad things that they're like, I need to be proactive about this and kind of head this off because this happened in my last marriage and I'm seeing it again. That happens a lot in second and third marriages where especially the women will notice these things. And the second dynamic is that the roommate situation where there's really little to no intimacy happening and you're stuck in this dynamic of being roommates and not lovers. Yeah. And sometimes one person has moved out of the bedroom. And then the last dynamic and most common when people seek us out is when they're just hanging on by a thread, when they're on the brink of divorce. And the only thing that's different between those three scenarios is just the amount of time that's passed between those stops along the way. Because I hear from people every day who they're hanging on by a thread, they're on the brink of divorce, and they're like, we were soulmates, we were best friends.
Yeah.
How did we even get here to this place? I hear it every day.
Yeah.
So it's just time.
Right. And usually when you ask about it, how long has it been going on? Most people can trace it back to very early on. It started early on, but it wasn't at the frequency or intensity yet
Right.
where it would derail them.
Right.
And so then, you know, the time in between those experiences, those negative experiences or those patterns was longer.
Right.
And so then it was like, didn't feel as urgent.
Right.
But then they get closer and closer together. And then the narrative takes on its own momentum.
It takes on its own momentum, and it goes down. It goes into a downward spiral. And then you get to where there's no passion, right? No intimacy anymore. And then you're anyway, we'll get into all that. But I just wanted to make that point. You can see yourself in any of these three dynamics or somewhere in between there, and just know that the time to get help is now. No matter where you are in your story, you need help. You need to get help.
Right. Exactly. And I think what it boils down to is ultimately in those three scenarios, there's some kind of unmet need. There's something that it could be on the part of one spouse, or it could be on the part of both spouses, where they really feel like there's something I can't get from my spouse that I really need. And it could be a very basic need that we all have as humans, like to be seen or heard or understood or valued. So it's not like you're off base for wanting that, but it might be that the pattern that you guys are in is actually setting it up to make you more likely to not get what you actually want. And we've talked about that before around sabotaging and things like that. But how do you guys, what are some of the biggest complaints that you hear, or what are the ways that this shows up for you, where whether it's the husband or the wife or both, where they're saying, I just feel like I can't get through to them. I can't get what I want. I keep trying. I keep saying it. I keep asking, and I can't get it.
Say that, ask the question again in just more succinct way, because I get what you're saying in terms of the way I see that most times that people are really struggling. And I really want to preface what I'm going to say by saying this. I don't want people to misunderstand when we say how to get more of what you want from your partner in the way that we're talking about where you have an advantage. You know, that's not what I don't think that's what we're talking about. I want to clarify that first and foremost. We're talking about supporting your partner in the way that they can show up and support you and what you need also. So that you create this momentum together in terms of this equilibrium where both of you are feeling cherished, heard, and supported, you know? So I want people to clearly understand that that's what we're more focused on than just having your way with someone.
Right. That's such a good point, because it's not about getting something from them. It's because we have more of what we need inside of us. And it's like, what's missing is often what we're not giving. We just don't realize it, but how people experience it is, I'm not getting what I want.
Yeah.
You're making a good point, Ned, which is that that's not the level that we stay in to address the problem.
Right. Yeah.
How we experience the problem. We've all been there. Was like, I just can't get what I want. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to see you have to go one level above that to look at it, to see that's not really what it is. It's something that I could be bringing differently.
Exactly.
That I have what it takes to create that.
Right.
It's within me, and it's a more empowering way of looking at it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that, before we kind of really get into how it's showing up. But one of the ways that I see, I see this is, the sex is usually affected by, and the intimacy is affected by people really not getting what they want. Because we're talking about stacking the resentment, and over time, because there's a lack of communication. And this is the other thing I want to say also, we start getting away from the core issue.
Yeah.
Because we start really focusing on the symptoms of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that's what, when we start talking about, the lack of connection and the lack of intimacy. Okay, now you can't communicate. Okay, you're talking about symptoms of a bigger problem. And unfortunately, that becomes the focus. And that's where people really start to down spiral. Because if you get to a point where you can't have a dialogue about one specific issue, then what you start doing is avoiding trying to have the conversations altogether. And now you find yourselves not being able to talk about anything. Okay.
And then you're not able to resolve it.
Exactly. You know,
and then you
so
go
now
more
it's like
into that place of wanting more of what you don't have.
right. And now what we're saying is, again, people are going, well, I can't get what I want, or he can't hear me, or she can't hear me. And it's because you haven't addressed the core issue. Right. Okay. You haven't learned how to talk to one another so you can be heard, you know, and we talk about this further, but that's how this begins to show up, and the problems begin to stack one on top of the other. And you find yourself, the further away you're getting further and further away from the core of the problem. Next thing you know, like you said, you're at some place where you don't even know how you got there. You're sleeping in separate rooms. Somebody's, you start looking outside the house for, attention.
Yeah. I have a really great example that I just thought of too. Working with a couple, and it's such a common problem that I could be talking about anybody, but I have a specific couple in mind. It's this pattern where he really isn't feeling like he's getting the affection, both non-sexual intimacy or sexual intimacy, that he needs.
Yeah.
And it's not just about sex, but it really is about that feeling of connection and closeness. He's not receiving that. He's not getting it. And he feels despair. Like, I don't know if I can do this, if I can't get this need met. This is really important to me.
Yeah.
His wife is saying, it's not that I don't want to connect with you in that way. It's just that I feel like you don't even see me. I'm not feeling like you're there in other ways. I don't feel like you're present in the household or with the kids, or seeing where my boundaries are, or even knowing what's going on in my inner world. And so it's really hard for me to connect with you in that way when that's not there.
Right.
And it's like he can't give her what she needs until he gets what he needs, and vice versa. And they're really in a gridlock around it. But really they want the same thing. It just shows up differently. And where dicey, and what you're saying, Ned, is that you get confused about what the real issue is.
Right.
You might start off as a logistical issue of like, we just need to have sex more often.
Yeah.
Or we need to just be able to problem solve this parenting thing where I feel like you're with me as a team.
Exactly.
But when you start talking about it, there's something else at stake underneath it. And then they get confused and it feels really loaded. And what seems like an obvious thing becomes about something else. And then it escalates, and then people get confused, and then they shut down because they don't even know how to untangle it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's where you have to know, like, what's really going on here? What is the core issue, and how is it showing up in these different symptoms? Because it will show up in different ways.
Exactly. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Really good
point.
point.
I think, what were you going to say, Kelly? I'm sorry, I just about to talk over you.
No. You go ahead.
Are you sure?
I was just going to go into another way that it shows up.
Go ahead. I was too, but I have a note here.
Okay. So
I'll hang on to it.
Yeah. And so I was just going to stack on what you were just saying and say another big way it shows up all the time is, we begin to just start looking at our partner as the problem. Our partner is the problem. They are the problem. And instead of looking at yourself as the problem, because as we say all the time, there's no such thing as marriage problems. There's really just two people with their own personal issues
that play into each other's.
Each other's that you're bringing into the marriage.
Yeah.
So it's like, what can you be doing differently? And it's usually always the case, unless we're talking about some serious addiction or personality issues that a person is really struggling with.
Or chronic abuse.
Okay, so we're not talking about those issues. Those issues require different kinds of interventions. But it's usually always the case that the very stuff that we project onto our partners is the stuff that we have to work on. We've got a story in there that we are completely projecting onto our partner.
Yep.
Right.
And you haven't, until you do the deep inner work on yourself, you're gonna continue to want to try to fix your partner when you need to be fixing yourself.
Yeah.
That's a huge one. That's huge.
And that's a hard one for people to hear, because then they feel like their spouse is getting off the hook. And it might be true that there is some behavior in their spouse that's problematic,
Right.
or lack of positive behaviors that exist.
Yeah.
And that's real. But you won't get there by focusing on that so much. It's better to start by looking inward and go, what does this mean to me? What does this bring up in me? Or is there something that I've split off within myself or disowned within myself that I'm now pointing out in my spouse, that I'm rejecting in my spouse, that actually is a part of me?
Yeah.
And if I can make peace with that, then my response to them is different. Then I can ask for the things I want with a different energy, and I'm more likely to get it. So it's not like you give up on, hoping to have if you have a vision for a healthy dynamic that you want and there's something missing, but it starts with yourself first.
Yeah.
And it's counterintuitive.
Yeah. We're here to fix ourselves. We're here to fix our own mindset. We're here to fix our own traumas. We're here to fix our own stories. And we're here to really get to what's going on inside of us,
Mm-hmm.
And it's pointing the finger and trying to figure out your partner is stupid. It's dumb. If you haven't even done that for yourself, like you can't even begin to work on intimacy issues if you haven't done the inside out work like you teach inside the program, Monika. And it's why the modules are laid out the way they are, because you spend so much time in the very beginning of our work with people getting to know thyself, becoming self-aware, looking at your belief structures. That's what you have to do first,
Yes, that is so true. And I want to share a personal example that kind of popped into my head as you were saying that, because you mentioned projection. And I had this is an example of my own projection. Maybe somebody can relate to this. I used to do this thing where I was really hard on myself, and I did not allow myself to have downtime. I had this like inner lazy person that I hated. I hated it when if I wanted to like just binge watch something, or if I just wanted to read a book or not do anything or take a break, I would judge myself, especially with young kids and working and building a business. And it's like, I was judgmental of myself. So then, and I would want to do everything, right? So then my husband was very unapologetically would say, I don't feel like doing that, so I'm not going to do that. Or he would take a shortcut and feed the kids something that wasn't healthy, where I would go the extra mile and make it healthy, even if it was more work. And he was more just like, I'm exhausted, I'm going to take a shortcut. And I really resented him for that. I judged him for that. I was really critical of him around that. We got into arguments because really what it was is that I didn't like that he gave himself permission to give himself some grace that I wasn't giving myself.
Yeah.
I'm not able to do that. Why should you be able to do that? That's not right. And when I realized that and embraced my own inner lazy person and gave myself permission, I don't have to do everything. In the end, I did less and he ended up doing more, and I ended up getting more of what I wanted from him, but it wasn't through judging him. It was through realizing what was going on for me. And when I shared that with him, it helped him go, oh, thank you for sharing that. Now I understand. And it models it. When you do that, it models it for your spouse to be able to feel safe to do that with you too.
Right.
Playing a part in that dynamic.
Yeah.
So that's just one example, but I think it's so important, like you say, Kelly, it is an inside job.
Yeah.
It totally is. I can totally relate to that story because it's very similar.
Yeah. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So what else? I guess it's kind of when it gets to the extreme place where when it gets to the point where the ratio of positive to negative gets really skewed, it just becomes a matter of degree. It's usually the same thing over and over again, but the degree and the intensity and the frequency just gets worse until they get to the point where they're hanging on by a thread. Yep. They're at the brink of divorce. They're fighting constantly. And there's just not enough positivity to even have hope. So then people throw in the towel. That's kind of the extreme manifestation of this inability to feel like you're going to get what you want. Because it's like, why try? Why have hope if I just can't get what I want from my spouse.
Yeah. Which is so crazy because it's like you haven't even done the work to try to fix it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's the case most times. And Ned said this perfectly yesterday when we were really going over this topic. He was like, you know, when you don't have the proper strategies and the proper mindset, you know, and 99% of people don't, which is why our divorce rate is just, you know, 75 to 80% at the end of the day. Not 50, like so many people think. If you don't have the proper strategies, proper tools, proper mindset, you're using on a daily basis bad strategies, losing strategies that don't work, and then just like stack the resentment over time.
And then you come in with your request with the energy of expectation that it won't be met. And when you come in with that expectation, you're already anticipating you're not going to get your needs met. You're going to come in such a way that's going to be very uninviting for your spouse.
Exactly. Yeah. It's almost like creating the opposite of the intention that you really want.
Yeah. Like a negative self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the way, I mean, and I think that's the biggest thing when we're talking here that people really need to recognize. The lack of action or inaction around the problem is not the way to solve it. And if you don't have the proper mindset, you are going to continue to stack, even when you're searching for ways to maybe help you with a problem. This is the other point I want to make also. Oftentimes you're missing a key component. Okay. And this is, you know, what we teach, but one skill is not, if you have the skill set and you don't have the mindset or work, and you don't have the mentorship, you're going to struggle.
You got
you know, and what you find in a lot of, you know, what I hear from a lot of people is there's always something missing.
Yeah.
That they can't quite get over the hump, or they find themselves, you know, going right back to the old patterns,
right?
And finding themselves in that circle again. You know, things work for a minute, and then all of a sudden it just takes one major thing, and they fall right back. You know, they feel like they've lost 8 steps. You know, and they're right back to where they began.
Wins.
Yeah. And I mean, and oftentimes that's the case. So I just want people to understand that too. You really have to make sure you're getting everything you need when you're looking for help also, you know?
Yeah, that's such a good point.
I wanted to say this because it's a really important point to make, to add to what you just said, babe. And that is most everyone who comes to get help from us, right? Like they've been to counseling, they've been to therapy, they've done programs, they've read the 5 love languages, they've read books.
They have the insight.
I mean, there are some clients that we have that have been doing work on themselves for years. They've gone to counseling for years. So they've done work, right? Like seeking the answers. But they're just learning little pieces of things, and they're not really learning like what you teach, Monika, that hidden barrier of really what holds you back in making long-lasting changes that you want to make.
Yeah, so that's a great point. I think looking at what if there's limiting beliefs beneath it, which we've talked about before, and it always comes back to that. That's, of course, such a primary important part to all of this, because you can have the insight, but the habits will take over. So in terms of solutions and what we want to offer you guys today, if you're in a place in your marriage where you're really feeling like, I just can't get this important need met. I don't feel valued. I don't feel cherished. I don't feel heard. There's a couple things I want to leave you with to think about. One is, first, really think about this expression, whatever is missing is what you're not giving. Now, that doesn't mean it's all your fault, but have a think about, where is it that I'm not giving what's missing? And look at yourself first and go, is there a way? Don't get tit for tat, just think, is there some way that I'm not showing up with that thing that I feel like is missing? First of all, so that's kind of speaking to the projection piece. Is there something that is wrong with my spouse that's actually a part of myself that I'm judging? That would be the place to start. And that's what I meant when I said our answer to the question of how to get what you want from your spouse is not what you think. It's starting with getting it from yourself first. It doesn't mean you're not going to still make requests and have boundaries and have a vision that you're going for, but this is the starting point, right?
Yeah.
And then just being willing to separate out, like you say, Ned, the symptoms from the core issues, and to be able to stick with one thing at a time when you talk about that stuff. What else would you guys add to help folks out?
Well, the solution is to learn the skills that you need and to learn this mindset piece of things. It's so important. You have to learn about the mind, how it works scientifically, and how to reprogram it if you want a transformation. We're not just talking about counseling here. We're talking about transformational stuff, you know, and that only happens and you only get the outcomes that you want when you have a transformation of the mind happen.
Exactly. Then you can come with the right energy to give whatever's missing. It's not easy to just be like, oh, I'm not giving the thing I want the most, so I'm just going to give it when you're feeling deprived. It's really hard to do that.
Yeah.
But you're right. If you learn to have the skills and you do the mindset work systematically, you can get there. But think about that in terms of, ask yourself right now, what different energy can I bring to the things that I'm asking for? And how can I be the change that I want to see first and give it a chance, so I can at least disrupt the old story and create the potential for a new narrative to develop a new relationship.
Right. Yeah.
And I know that, Ned, you have a client coming up that you have to visit. So in the interest of time, we have to wrap up, but I just want to invite you guys, if you want to explore this further with us, you're welcome to book a call, and we can explore, you know, what that might look like for you given your specific situation. What's the unmet need? What are the problematic dynamics? What's a little bit of the context, because everybody's unique, and then we'll see if we can point you in the right direction. You just have to go to monikahoyt.com/talk, and you can book a call with one of us at a time that works for you.
Yeah.
And if you have any questions about this talk, go ahead and post your questions in the comment below, and I promise you we will go through and answer those questions.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thank you, Ned and Kelly, for joining again. And I hope you guys all have a wonderful rest of the weekend. We'll catch you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.